Hello, and thank you for joining the 2024 Nonprofit Security Grant Program Overview webinar. As an overview of our presentation, we'll do a quick look at the Vermont Homeland Security Unit. We'll talk about the NSGP application pre-work and also how to complete your application. So I'm Lainey Knapp, a Homeland Security Program Manager here in the Homeland Security Unit. We also have Callie Audette as another Program Manager, and currently are hiring for a Program Chief. I'll pause for a moment if you want to take a look at our mission as detailed on the screen. So as an overview, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, or NSGP, is one of 3 grant programs that constitute the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA's focus on enhancing the ability of state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, as well as nonprofits, to prevent, protect against, respond to, and recover from terroristic attacks. Our unit also oversees the Homeland Security Grant Program, which constitutes the Homeland Security Grant Program, SHSP, and also Operation Stone Garden, OPSG. In fiscal year 2024, the total amount of funds allocated for the NSGP program is $274.5 million, and $137.25 million is directed towards the state level of that program. Just to be clear, that is at a federal level across the country. That is not Vermont's allocation, unfortunately. So if you're looking to determine your eligibility for NSGP, here is some helpful criteria to review. This program, as the title might imply, is specifically for nonprofit organizations. We do understand that some nonprofit organizations are not required to file for an exemption status, and so if that is relevant to your organization, we do recognize and understand that. Otherwise, organizations should be determined to be at a high risk of terrorist attack. Please note that the state of Vermont, through the Homeland Security Unit, is the only entity eligible to apply directly to FEMA, which means that applications from entities such as yours must come through us, and then we funnel them to FEMA. There are a variety of entities that are not eligible. We're not going to go through all of the options, but here are some common ones: for-profit hospitals, for-profit transportation companies, organizations that are active in politics and lobbying, other for-profit businesses. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. If you're interested in applying and you're not sure if you meet criteria for eligibility, please feel free to reach out to us directly. So the purpose of NSGP funding is to provide support for physical security enhancements and other security activities for nonprofit organizations that are at high risk of terrorist attack. So this can include things like physical security enhancements, security-related training, construction costs, planning costs, and training and exercise. So upgrades to your building, to security systems, to intercoms, to door locks, to cybersecurity. There's a variety of projects that can fall under this grant, and we will talk about that in greater detail later in this presentation. As a note, organizations with one site may apply for up to $150,000 for that site. If your organization has multiple sites, you can apply for up to 3 sites for a total of $450,000. So again, $150,000 per site. If your organization has more than 3 sites, we still cannot accept more than 3 applications. That is the federal maximum. And so as we start looking at allowable costs, the FEMA authorized equipment list, or the AEL, outlines what equipment is allowable under this grant program. And in the materials on our website, we do dive deeply into this, and you can also access the AEL yourself, if you want to look up any specific types of equipment or training and make sure that they are allowable under this program. But the list on your screen is a fairly comprehensive collection of what we typically fund through this program. So portable radios, generators, alert systems, software and firewalls, public address systems and public notification systems, etc. And so, as I mentioned, there are items that are not specifically equipment that are allowable under this grant. So training and exercise costs are allowable, but they are limited in their scope. So they're limited to an organization's security personnel, staff members, and volunteers only. Training costs are limited to attendance fees and related expenses such as materials, supplies, and equipment. And as noted, overtime, backfill, and travel expenses are not allowable. There are a variety of training topics that can be applied for under this grant. I'm not going to read this whole paragraph off the screen to you, but I am going to let you take some time to look through the information. And there are some additional, like we have funded Stop the Bleed training and kits in the past, training aids, first aid, and other courses are allowable. And if you have questions about specifics, again, feel free to reach out to us and or review that FEMA AEL to see more details about what you're looking to apply for. There are also some additional allowable costs like planning for security or emergency planning expenses and materials required to conduct those planning activities. Planning must be related to the protection of the facility and the people within and should include consideration of individuals with access and functional needs, as well as those with limited English proficiency. And so some examples are the development or enhancement of security plans, development of plans related to evacuation or shelter in place, and security risk management plans. Moving on to some examples of unallowable costs, landscaping, guns and weapons, Knox boxes, overtime, general use expenditures, license plate readers, facial software recognition. I'll give you a moment to look through this list. Okay, so assuming that you've seen at this point your organization is eligible, or you're pretty sure you're eligible, and you've seen some items that you may be interested in applying for, let's talk about what you need to do to apply. So again, you need to make sure that you're eligible and be able to demonstrate that your organization is at a high risk of a terrorist attack. You cannot be listed on the Vermont suspended and debarred list. You must not be on the Department of Public Safety's restricted parties list. You must have a valid DUNS number. You must read and comply with the written standards for requirements in the 2 CFR. And these funds must not be requested in order to supplant. And so you actually need to submit to us. First, you need to complete an application. In this case, it's an investment justification, and that is submitted as a PDF. You also need to do a vulnerability or site assessment. This can be a self-assessment using CIS's template. We also have our own template that is linked further in this presentation. It can be conducted by state or local law enforcement or an outside contractor. We understand because this grant has a short turnaround time this year that it may be easiest to do a self-assessment of your facility. But again, feel free to reach out to local or state law enforcement if you are looking for some additional support. You also will need to complete and sign a 2-page signature document and submit it as a PDF. The signature page also acts as a checklist for all the items that need to be included in your application. So if you're taking notes right now, that's great, but you can also refer to the signature page to confirm everything that needs to be included in your submission to us. You will also need to do a Department of Public Safety or DPS financial risk assessment, which is a short survey you take online. Documentation of your 501c3 status will need to be submitted. Again, if your organization does not require this paperwork as you're considered exempt, you can let us know. We also will need to see a certificate of insurance with your current coverage listed. And depending on your project, you may need to submit some additional materials, which we will get into now. So if your organization is not a spiritual or religious organization, if you are a nonprofit school or medical facility, you will need, again, documentation from the IRS demonstrating that. But if your organization is too large to accomplish the project upfront and then request reimbursement, you may want to request a cash advance from us, and if so, we will need the items in the you must provide column. So a copy of your agency's cash advance policy following the guidelines outlined on the screen. If you are requesting equipment, if the equipment costs more than $100 per unit, you will need to solicit quotes for that equipment. And we will talk about the quote process a little further, but we will need quotes for each piece of equipment, and we would need 3 quotes per item. If you are requesting a vendor offered training, then we will need a course description or syllabus. And if you are requesting an increase in the quantity of NSGP funded equipment already purchased, for example, if you have previously purchased security cameras with NSGP funding and you would like to purchase more security cameras, you'll need to complete the Homeland Security Grant Program property records list. And you can do so by following the link on this slide. And if I haven't mentioned this already, the slide deck will be available on our website. The links are also on our website, but if you want to flip through this and access any of the resources or review any of the information, this will be made available. So in talking about quotes, as I mentioned, you will need to get 3 quotes if the equipment is $100 or more per unit. And so you can accomplish this a variety of ways. You can actually go to the website where the equipment is sold, including somewhere like Amazon, put the items in your cart and take a screenshot. That can be considered a quote. You can contact a company by email and you can consider their reply outlining any financial details a quote. And you can also reach out to local companies, especially if there's installation work to be done, and these are items that are going to be installed on your facility, and you can get a quote from them for that project. And again, if you are requesting a vendor training with a syllabus and a description, you'll also need quotes for that. And so an example, you can Google law enforcement equipment, select a website, scroll to the bottom of the page, and then you can find on some websites an option to select request a quote. And as I mentioned, you can put the items in your shopping cart and take a photo of that. Or reach out and request a quote by email and then include the response to us in your application. And in terms of illustrating that your organization is at high risk for a terrorist attack, these are some materials that have been published by federal organizations recently with statistics in them. So citing something like this in your application can make it a stronger case when we submit these to FEMA for them to evaluate for funding. And here's another example of a material that you may want to look up or reference or find something similar to when you're preparing your application. As I mentioned, you will need to do a vulnerability assessment. And so these are some of the tools that are available. The HSU self-assessment, the CISA self-assessment. And if you want to contact CISA, they can also do an assessment for you, or as I mentioned, local or state law enforcement. Again, because of the short turnaround time for this particular grant application this year, you may want to go with a self-assessment. Also, I want to mention all of these tools are free. So there's no cost associated with getting a self-assessment through any of the resources that we're suggesting. There's no cost associated with your application. And so clearly we've outlined a lot of information already. If you're looking for the information, the RFP is on our website. The RFP, or the request for proposal, goes over allowable costs, unallowable costs, eligibility, what you need to submit, and the resources that can assist you in completing your application. Next, we're going to look at the application itself, or the investment justification, which is the actual template that FEMA provides for applicants to fill out. So it's pretty straightforward, especially the first page. You're going to put in your applicant information into this PDF. This is linked on our website, as all the materials are. So going over the legal name of the organization, the address, the county, confirming whether or not you own the building, and if you're leasing it, confirming that you have permission to make enhancements, and whether or not you're currently using the property. As we move on, some more applicant information, including information about your mission, ideology, and/or beliefs. This is a very important part of your application. Please make sure that you provide all necessary information. As a note, we cannot submit supplemental documents to FEMA, so please make sure that the information is only on this investment justification or IJ template. You cannot use additional space on something like a Word document, because we will not be able to send that to FEMA and they will not review it. So after you put in your mission information, select your organization type, function, and primary affiliation from the drop downs in this form. Those little gray boxes with the arrow indicate whether you're 501c3 exempt, add your UEI or DUNS number. There is a question on here about whether or not your organization is in a UASI, and the answer is no. Then we'll move on to background information, so symbolic value of the sites, whether or not they're a national or historic institution, that kind of thing, anything that may make your organization more susceptible to terrorism. Also note any previous or existing role in responding to or recovering from terrorist attacks. There's a risk section where you can fill out information about threat and vulnerabilities. So this is a great place to cite documents like the ones I showed a few slides ago that have statistics on attacks or violence against certain types of organizations. So there's a little bit more information about risk on the next page, including potential consequences. And then the next section is about facility hardening. So describe how target hardening activities focus on the prevention of and/or protection against terrorist attacks for vulnerabilities and risks. And so this is where you're going to kind of support what you're requesting in your application and explain why it's going to be useful in helping mitigate some of the risks and concerns that are described in previous sections. There's a little more information about facility hardening, and here you can use the drop down to select the information, or the equipment rather, that you are requesting for your project. And this is helpful because you don't have to be looking up and making sure that each individual category is allowable under this grant. All the allowable categories are pre-built right into the sheet. You'll also add information about what vulnerability those requests or pieces of equipment, etc., will be addressing, and estimate the cost rounded to the nearest dollar. Then you're going to outline milestones for your key activities. Please note that we will not receive our award, and therefore we will not be making sub-awards until September of 2024. So realistically, your milestones should not be prior to that, and they probably will not all fall in the month of September. So think about the time that you'll need to order equipment, to receive equipment, to go through the actual process of installing or training staff on it, that sort of thing, and how much time your organization will actually need to complete those activities so that your milestones are as realistic as possible. You will not be held to those specific milestones. Please understand that. We understand that there may be delays in ordering equipment or receiving equipment due to supply chain problems, that kind of thing. But we still do want to make this a realistic look at what we're planning. Then there's a project management section, information about who will manage the projects, their contact information, and their subject matter expertise. Also going to put in some information about the impact, how the outputs and outcomes will mitigate risks outlined in the background and risk section. And then you're also going to fill out a funding history section. So if you've received NSGP funding before, you'll put some information about that in this section. And then the end of the form is just contact information and certifying that the form is filled out accurately and to the best of your ability, and that you are an employee or affiliated volunteer filling this out on behalf of your organization with their knowledge and permission. So that's the IJ. It is pretty straightforward, but if you do have any questions or any issues while you're filling it out, please feel free to contact us or attend one of our technical assistance seminars. Now we're going to take a quick look at the signature page that I had referenced earlier. And so this is a Word document that we will have on our website available for you. And again, it's going to guide you through what you need to do and what you need to submit. And so as you're checking off the boxes, if you have not completed these first 3 boxes, then you know your application is definitely not complete. If you move on to the second section and you're not checking off any boxes, please just make sure that none of them are actually relevant to your application. It is possible that you don't need any materials in that section if you are applying for low-cost items and are a first-time recipient of these funds. But most of the time, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 of those documents necessary for your applications. This will help guide you through that. You want to make sure that you're checking the boxes as well, so that not only are you aware of what you're submitting with your application, but that we can see that it's complete as well. And then you also are going to go through and check off some information about your organization, agreeing to certain statements and policies. And this is really what we've touched on already, that you're a 501c3, that you are not on the suspended and debarred list, etc. And as a note, text boxes with a blue rectangle around them on this page are clickable links. So when we're referencing a policy or procedure that you need to certify that you've read and complied with, you can actually click that link and take a look at it if you are not already familiar with that policy. And so you're going to want to make sure all of the boxes are checked in the final section, because those are all the ones acknowledging that you are reading and complying with documents and policies and procedures that are required by us or by FEMA or DHS to participate in this grant. Once you have completed that, you're going to add contact information to the bottom of the sheet. You're going to sign it. And you also want to make sure that you're saving this as a PDF before you submit it to us. So it's a pretty straightforward signature page. The goal is really to just guide you to make sure that your application is complete and that you are prepared as an applicant for our review process. Now, we're going to talk briefly about how applications are scored. So we do have a nonprofit security grant working group, which consists of representatives from religious organizations, law enforcement, and other nonprofits. Each application is scored using a template provided by FEMA. They assess how many points each section will receive. We score the applications with the working group, ensure that there's a consensus on how the applications are scored. They're also evaluated within DPS at higher levels within our leadership. And then we send those scores on to FEMA. FEMA also reviews the scores, and they have some criteria additional to what we have. So they add some additional points as needed on their end based on their formulas. And so FEMA calculates the absolute final score on these applications and makes the final determination on which applications are funded. And so the timeline for this, the application period opens May 3rd. And it closes on May 31st. We're trying to give folks as much time as possible to apply, but we do have a shortened window this year because of the budgetary concerns at a federal level and their impact on when this grant was released or opened this year. So in June, applications will be scored and evaluated. June and July are the tentative time period to give applicants tentative approval or denial notification. We will be submitting the applications to FEMA by June 24th. That's the due date for this program. We can go ahead and start work on any programs that are given conditional approval on their EHP or the environmental and historic preservation. We will give you more information about that, assuming that your project receives a tentative approval. In September, we receive our final package from FEMA, letting us know what applications they have approved. And subawards will be made after that time, so you'll be contacted by us to sign your agreement and to confirm how much funding you've been allocated. Pending that there are no holds on your project and that your EHP has been completed and approved by FEMA, spending may begin. Your EHP does not have to be completed prior to you receiving your subaward. For many applicants, it's not done on that timeline. We do like to do them as soon into the grant as possible because it'll give you more time for spending. But again, we'll get further into what an EHP is and how it's conducted if your application is at least tentatively given approval. I do want to emphasize that no spending can be done until you have an executed subaward and, if applicable, an approved EHP. So this will be in any tentative approval emails, but just because you receive tentative approval, it does not mean you can go ahead and spend on your project. If you do spend prior to all of the conditions being met that I've outlined, we will not be able to reimburse you. So our key takeaways, there are a variety of options for self-assessment, so you can identify your vulnerabilities and outline them well in the IJ. They're directly linked, so that's a crucial part of your application. Must be an eligible entity. When you are describing the threat or risk, consider events in your community, in your county, the state of Vermont, in New England, the United States, and the world. You do not just have to look at what has happened on your street. You can reference events that are taking place on a larger scale to support your application. And again, the application period will close on May 31st of 2024 at 5 p.m. Late applications will not be accepted. So that means if your application comes to us at 5:01, that is a late application and we will have to disregard it. Now, I know that as you go through your application, you may have questions. So we are offering 4 technical assistance sessions that will be held at the dates and times outlined on the screen. You can sign up for them using a Microsoft form that is also linked on our website in the same area as all of the application materials. If you have a question and you just want to shoot it off via email, if you'd prefer not to attend a technical assistance session, you can't, or it's just a quick question that you want to get answered, please feel free to send them over to that email on the screen, dps.hsugrants@vermont.gov, and we will be happy to assist you. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need assistance or have questions during this period of time.